Hey guys, thanks so much for joining me again. This is a collection that I want to reintroduce to you, and I'm inspired to share with you once again. It's a collection I worked on a couple of years ago through the Channeling Erik blog. Erik is a spirit guide that I worked with for a couple of years to channel guidance, intuitive insight, and information to truly help you live the best life possible. These are some of my most favorite moments and most loved content and messages for you. And I truly hope that it finds its way into your life and helps you live a better life.
We sort of got in with the last session to talking about sacred geometry. And I've looked at pictures, images of sacred geometry. It's really beautiful. But, I felt like we really need to dedicate an entire session to really explaining why it exists, what it does, what's the purpose of it, and so on. So, Erik, hi, sweetie pie.
He's mocking you. He goes, "Hi, sweetie pie."
Oh,
And he's
hi,
blowing you
sweetie
kisses.
pie.
He
I
says, "I
know.
love you,
I'm
Mom."
such a sap. So tell us, first of all, what created sacred geometry? What's it made of? What is it? Just go where you want to go. I'll shut up now.
Before he even starts talking, he's so sweet. He's like behind you with his right hand on your right shoulder. So he stands behind you and he says, "She takes it so well." Like from all of your children mocking you and teasing and picking and playing, he's like, "She
Oh,
takes it so
yeah.
well." He's
I'm at
just
one with my flaws. I
he's
really
very
am.
sweet, just adoring you.
Oh.
Um, he's like, "Okay, so sacred geometry," and he has his hands like this, like he's ready to talk. Um, this is the natural flow, he says, the natural flow, the rhythm of life. Everything in life, of life, that has life, will reflect, um, in some way. It's sacred geometry. It can be measured. Everything can be measured. When you begin to look at, he's showing me like, is kind of being random. He like showed me an image of him picking up a seashell and like how it has a spiral, but then the energy of that like affecting other things in its environment, being affected by other things in its environment as well. And what he's saying is like, he keeps saying Newton's law. So I think that's where like for every action there's an opposite and equal reaction or something. That's the concept he wants to look at here when we're talking about sacred geometry, because he says, "Mom, if you push," now just bear with me in thought with that word, because he's actually just using energy to talk. If you push here and now, it may cause an effect on the other side of the world. It will, not may, it will, he says,
Okay.
because everything is connected in sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is the measurement of everything in vibration and the rhythm that it carries, like where it exists in that rhythm, in that vibration. So you may have, let's say for example, he's showing like this massive oak tree, massive old oak tree. So this thing is going to have a very intricate web, he says, but like a very intricate design, because of how the seasons change, its environment changes over and over and over, and it's still there, right, existing and being affected by its environment. So it becomes very dense, very intricate in its own geometry,
Okay.
and its own existence in these different frequencies. So then comes along, it's like showing this little human just bebopping through the woods and feeling like a draw, feeling a connection to this tree. I don't know where he's going with this, but he's showing like then this human comes in and feels a connection or loves or adores this tree or whatever. Then that human takes a piece of like the vibration, the
Geometry.
makeup of that tree,
Mm-hmm.
and like carries that imprint in their sacred geometry, and vice versa. So the tree does too. So it's it's like a big spider web, Mom. He says everything's connected by sacred geometry, and he keeps going back to like this. It's the rhythm of life. Everything exists in that rhythm. It's a scale, but everything doesn't exist at the same place on that scale. So I asked him, I said, does sacred geometry, did it exist first, or anything that materialized, then becomes measured in sacred geometry? And he's showing like, he actually makes me feel like sacred geometry is a vibration, right? It's a measurement. And he says that it exists first, and that something materializes through it.
So does consciousness, in other words, thought, take that web of sacred geometry and use it as almost like clay to mold something into the material to create reality? Do we use sacred geometry and that web with thought to create reality? Like I could take a web of beautiful sacred geometry and think about creating I don't know why I'm just thinking duck, whatever. I know I can't create a duck. I guess I could if I were powerful enough, and then I could just boing, create a quack quack little duck.
You could. He says you could. Because sacred geometry, just like you talked, when you connect to it in thought, when you encompass it, and we'll go there in a minute. Okay. When you can understand it, more so when you can accept it, that's when you can also use it. People do already, he says, for manifestation, to manifest whatever you want. So this is getting into playing with he says, the laws of nature. And he's showing like how people there's been a few, not many, he says, a few people who can take an object and change its form with their thought, maybe even with their hands by manipulating it where other common men cannot. And that's because it's a claircognizant thing, though, because I don't know that everyone's just going to be able to read about it and do it. It's not necessarily that easy.
Okay.
It's a claircognizant thing where you are close in resonance with that sacred geometry and understand it enough to manipulate it or manifest through it. So, and he keeps using David Blaine. Do you remember that guy?
Oh,
We've
yeah.
talked about him before.
Right.
He keeps using him as an example. So sacred geometry, like the big perspective looking in, he says, is a way to measure the vibration, the frequency. It's just a different way to measure the existence of something in a physical way,
okay.
In a scientific, tangible way. So, and two, one, he keeps wanting to reiterate. I don't know if I've articulated this well enough because he keeps repeating it. The existence of one thing, because he's showing something like kind of coming into manifestation, materialization. And as it exists, then because it exists, no matter what it is, everything else then is affected by it too. Let's take
all the sacred geometry is all connected, and so if you take one piece of web and mold it into something, it's going to affect the rest of the web that's not being molded into that something. Is it like that?
Yeah, he says think about it like that. Picture a spider web. No matter what, if you just change a little bit of it over here, the whole thing is still going to be affected.
Oh yeah.
And then he says, like, take an acute example of like when a family has a new baby, and a new baby comes into the family. That's going to then push and shove consciousness of everybody affected by that birth. Everybody is now changed because of that new person, that new something. So no matter what it is that is in existence, if it changes, so does everything else.
Okay.
That's why he's just kind of showing like And then he's going back down to the acute level. That's why it's so hard for people to hear their own thoughts sometimes. That's why it's so hard for people to know themselves or feel grounded, because we are all connected by sacred geometry. We all feel each other at some level, but most of us don't understand it. And then that's when we kind of like lose ourselves in it, he says. So again, he says, I want you guys to remember that. And he's very compassionate and very serious, I guess, about this message. No matter what you do here and now will affect someone, could be on the other side of the world. Like if you push here, someone may feel that clear on the other side of the world.
It's like the butterfly effect, right?
It is a law, Mom. He says it's proven, and like you're right.
The wings of a butterfly will, change the wind and create an effect, across the world.
He says, because he says, like, so again, think about, because he's really passionate about this. I have chills. Like a parent, if a parent practices compassion, the kid will know compassion. The kid will grow up and practice, compassion, maybe to animals, to people, to the community. So it has that larger, massive effect. He's kind of like saying, take responsibility for who you are, for how you exist, what you do to your environment, because it's all creating this massive spread of effect.
So this web of sacred geometry has always existed?
He says, since the beginning of time.
Which there is no time, so forever. So it's always existed.
He says, we're only now becoming conscious of it.
What about rocks, other inanimate objects? Do they have sacred geometry as well? Or is it only life forms?
He says, yep, everything that you can touch and feel, even things that you can't touch and feel, are connected through sacred geometry. And he said, he was kind of finishing his thought about like consciousness is now we're just now becoming aware of it. And then he kind of rambled off to himself. And this kind of freaks me out a little bit, because it's one of those really big, the energy behind it is so big that, like, he says, he's talking about mankind as a whole, and he kind of like threw himself back and was laughing, and he said, consciousness is becoming aware of itself through humans. So that's kind of a big concept to try to grasp. But as we, I guess, I don't even know how to try to translate that. He just, that's probably why he's laughing when he says it, because he knows I'm like, what?
He does it too much for us.
Yeah, he just says consciousness is becoming aware of itself through humans.
Well, that's like God is using us, and we are God, to have the human experience so that it can know itself. So the grand source, all consciousness, trying to become more aware of itself through humans and other things.
Okay.
Yes. Maybe
he says, you are God expressed as Elisa Medhus. And I'm God expressed as
don't
Erik
ever
Medhus.
Forget that. I'm God.
I mean, you have to understand. But then, I mean, this is a fine line too, because he says it depends on where your understanding is too. Sometimes he'll pass things along knowing that the listeners will understand him, and other times he won't, because he doesn't want to overwhelm.
Yeah.
But he says you have to take responsibility for your actions, for your thoughts, but on the same sense though too, everything that's meant to be will be. If it wasn't supposed to happen, it won't.
Right.
So, it's kind of like speaking out of both sides of his mouth, but he didn't like when I said that. He's like,
it's like, what? Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, now, if we knew more about sacred geometry, what could mankind do with that knowledge? What uses could be developed from that knowledge, from intimately understanding all of sacred geometry?
He says if we intimately understood sacred geometry, you would see radical changes in the environment and the way it's respected. You would see also radical changes in the way people treat themselves and others.
Because the knowledge of being connected. right?
Right,
Right.
exactly. That's the whole bottom line. That's the foundation, is the connectedness. If we truly deeply saw and understood how, now some people do, So, but he says, if we did by the masses understand, it's like that biofeedback. Like, I see what I just did and how it affected my environment, how that affects me. He says you would see radical behavior changes, radical changes in lifestyles, because people, without being insulting, he says people are very mindless in their actions, in their words, to people, to the environment, and so on, and they don't often realize that that mindlessness, they will just become a victim of their own mindlessness.
Okay.
So
interesting.
So go out and get your book, he says. Read up on sacred geometry.
Yeah, we're going to definitely have to.
I hated geometry. I can't imagine this.
It's actually, I've seen artwork, and one of my blog members does beautiful artwork of sacred geometry. It's just absolutely amazing. I bet there are probably people who can see sacred geometry, all the web, and Kim looks different, and I look different, and that rock looks different, has a completely different design. Is that the case?
He's like, he's like, yep.
So there's some people who are gifted enough to see the intricate, energetic web of everything.
He says yes. There are some that can see it. That's why some can draw it, paint it, and then he says there are more that can feel it.
Really?
That it's like it's telepathic, or he's using telepathy and claircognizance like in the same, like interchangeably. He says people will feel it and understand it through like the telepathy or claircognizance, just a sense of knowing how they're affected in it and through it.
Is that how telepathy works? Like you got this web, you can sort of hear people's thoughts because of
channeling. You are channeling Erik, because that is exactly what you're talking about.
So somebody thinks something, and that affects the web, and so it comes to you, and you capture their thought.
He's like, think about, yeah, exactly, and that's where he was going. Like, it's so funny that you bring that up, because he's like, think about the phone game. Remember how when we were kids, we used to use like a can with a string?
Yeah.
Think about it like that. Like, if you are connected in these webs, which you are, he says, your thoughts will go out and exist, in these little lines, and eventually it will affect somebody else. So that is the basis, the starting place, the existence of telepathy. So.
Then what about spoon bending? Go ahead.
Okay, I'll ask him that in just a second. I asked him, I said, well, what if there's...
Go ahead.
Yeah. I said, what if there was no sacred geometry?
Ooh.
And he literally, like, showed me a blackout. Like, there would be no existence.
Yeah, you could not have form, right? Without sacred geometry. You couldn't have material form.
Yeah, he started showing everything, like, just disappearing, and it's really, everything becomes silent. It's very eerie.
Oh.
So spoon bending, he says, is being very, like, very much through clairsentience, which is feeling connected, being connected through feeling. So you can really feel the vibes of someone. It may be like, oh, I feel like you got to call your spouse. Are you okay, honey? I'm just really thinking about you, feeling like something's up. What's up? Well, I feel like crap today. Thanks for calling. So you're connected based on feeling, and that's how someone can bend a spoon. He says,
like Jamie should just rub it between her fingers, the neck of the spoon, and it just droops. And my daughter, Christina, can do the same thing. I mean, she's, bam, bends it. So I'm wondering if you sort of visualize the web, the sacred geometry web, and manipulate it maybe with your mind.
He's showing sort of, but he says it's like putting your consciousness into the spoon, or like you becoming it becoming you, like seeing that there is no difference.
Okay.
And then kind of like convincing the spoon to bend by way of shifting your consciousness to it, through it, whatever you want.
Getting the molecules to move apart from each other, maybe.
I'll have to try that sometime when I'm feeling like really centered and focused. I've never tried that, but it sounds cool.
I've done it before, once or twice, but since then Most of the time I can't. All right, anything else on sacred geometry before we close?
He just says, his advice, he says, watch your back because you might be a victim of your own actions. So be mindful. He goes, Mom, this is the basis of where the idea of karma came from. He doesn't like the word karma, but essentially when you put something out there, somebody else and something else will be affected by it, but so will you, because you exist in your own way.
Sure.
So be mindful, he says.
Right. Okay.
All right, I truly hope you enjoyed that message, and there's going to be plenty more where that came from. We're going to continue to share these messages with you and continue to channel Spirit to inspire you, ground you, and help you feel connected. Join our community. You can like and subscribe to this channel to stay in the loop with more content as we share more information. Also, join me online. My website is kimberly-ray.com, and you can find me on social media across the board. Join our community online at kimberly-ray.com. Feel free to submit your questions and join our retreats. We have retreats all around the world every year, throughout the year. Also, if you'd like a one-on-one session, connect with your loved ones, you can join me online as well. Social media across the board, find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. And as always, take good care of yourself and take care of each other. Thanks for watching, guys. See you soon.